Okay. Earlier, or last week on Friday, some students came home with this paper, and we've posted it on the Facebook page. This is just some STAAR test tips from your math teacher. This is also posted on your students' class of whatever class they're in group on Schoology. So feel free to look at that there. It's so many words though, and I know that that's going to mean that we don't all read it, and that's okay. But here's an example of how we are asking students to attack their test. So as soon as possible, the student gets to school and immediately they're in their testing room. The first thing they do is ask for some things. They need to ask their test teacher. This is not automatically given, which is why we need students to ask for it. We need students to ask for a paper version of the STAAR chart. We need students to ask for scratch paper, and we need students to ask for a pencil. The reason we have students ask for a STAAR chart is because we make all sorts of helpful annotation notes about topics we've done this year on the STAAR chart, so they can refer back to this and have some extra information at their fingertips as long as they're making those annotations on the STAAR chart. Now, something that they should know about that is once they get their STAAR chart, they're going to want to immediately annotate it. We're not going to annotate the STAAR chart. Students should not be annotating the STAAR chart until after the test has started. So we can annotate the chart after the test has started. It may count as an irregularity if the student begins before the test has started, and an irregularity could result in maybe not scoring the test. So we don't want that to happen. So that's the very first thing that we need students to do. After that, we're asking that students go through the test 5 times, which sounds ridiculous. We're going to go through the test, though, 5 times. Okay, that sounds silly, but they're only going to do the math on each question once. We just want them to go through the test 5 times, and this is the game plan. So the very first time they go through the test, they'll just sort questions into a category. We'll talk about those categories momentarily. After that, now they're going to attack each category and answer the questions in those categories. So the second thing that they'll do is they'll go through the category of questions. They'll answer the questions that they had to work on a little bit harder than they would have wanted. They might have had to think about something more in depth or really call on some remembering there. And then so these are the questions that they think they know, but they have to remember and do some stuff before they can actually answer the question. So they'll answer those questions first. The third time they've gone through the test, they'll answer any questions that they thought were just going to be super easy. Questions that they just automatically could look at and know. Answer the questions, the easy ones. The easy to me questions. Okay. The fourth time they go through the test, this is when they're going to make the educated guess. So they're going to answer the educated guess questions. We're going to emphasize educated guess here because I've got a little process that will help them go from randomly guessing to making an actual good educated guess. Okay, and then the fifth time they go through the test, they're going to review any flagged questions. That sounds like a lot, but you're only answering each question once, and then you're going back and looking at some questions, not all. And those questions aren't going to be too much of a terror for students, and we'll talk about why as we go through here. A little side note I want to make is that while you're sorting questions, you do not answer anything. I don't want any brain power to be used while you're sorting questions. This is really just getting a preview of all of the math that's going to be on the test. So you're not answering anything here. Okay. And the next thing is, if it's at all possible, we want the educated guess questions, we want to have 20 or less. We want 20 or less questions in our educated guess column. Okay, so since the first thing we have to do is sort our questions, what we've had students practice is they will first make a column, or 3 columns. So they'll make the 3 columns. One of those columns is for the easy questions, easy to them at least, not necessarily to everybody. The questions that they think they're going to have to work a little bit harder at. So this is the questions where they might have to work or think about some things or remember some things before they'll answer it. And then we'll have a column for educated guesses. I'm educated to guessing how to spell things. Okay, so the very, very first time they're going through the test, they're just sorting questions. So first thing, you're just sort. So an example might be that I'm putting question number 1 in the easy column, and then I go on to number 2. I'm not answering it, but I see number 2, and wow, that was like a difficult question. It's about transformations. I'm going to have to put it there. Question number 3 might be something I'm working at. 4, I know a lot about functions, but I'm going to have to review that on my STAAR chart before I move on. Number 5 was an easy question for me. It was just solving equations. And then number 6, there's a whole picture that I don't even know anything about, so I'm going to have to educatedly guess there. So this is what I mean by students are sorting their problems. They're not solving anything. They're literally just putting the problem number in the column of what they need to, of when they're going to answer it. They're categorizing based on the difficulty for that question for them. Okay, that's what's going to happen first. After that, students are supposed to go through and look at any of the questions that they'll have to work on a little bit harder than they'd want. So this is any questions where they have to work or think or remember stuff. Now we want them to go through these questions first because this is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time. Questions that come easy to us, we're not going to have to spend a lot of brain power on. But questions where I have to work at something or think about some things a little bit more in depth or remember things, that's going to take a lot of brain power, and we have the most brain power during a STAAR test at the beginning of the STAAR test. So this is where we want students to spend the bulk of the beginning of their test. At first, they just got a nice little preview and saw some math vocabulary as they were going through it. So now they're in math mode, and now they have a lot of energy. At the start of the test, we want them spending most of their time here on the questions they think they can get if they do some extra work. Okay, so during this category, they will answer these questions. Okay, now because these questions are taking a lot of work, that's taking a lot of brain power. And something that we know from, I'm sure there's several science things out there, I don't know. I just do this personally for me and it helps. After I'm feeling overwhelmed or like I'm doing a whole lot of work, if I'm very intentional about my breathing, my brain kind of calms down a little bit. And I think we see that a lot when people are stressed out and we say, oh, just take a deep breath, right? We're just giving ourselves that cue that everything is okay, and we're recentering ourselves so that we can focus a little bit easier. So after you answer a question, it sounds silly, but after you answer the question, we're going to take a big, deep breath. Then we can go answer another question. And then we'll take a nice, deep breath. And we'll keep doing that until we're done with this column of questions. Okay? That's because we're working so hard on number 3, right? So before I go on to number 4, I want to get some of that energy and brain power back. I'm recentering myself before I go on to number 4. Okay? So the next thing I need them to do after they've answered the question and before they go on to their little breathing exercise, if the question was easier than they thought, we're going to flag the question. What flagging the question does is it puts a little reminder on the test that says, hey, you wanted to go back and review this before you turned it in. So we're flagging any question in this column that we thought was a little bit easier than we'd anticipated. Okay. And once you're done with all those questions, great. So something I like to do with my flagged questions in this column, after I answer it, I'm crossing it out. Number 3 was that question, and I think I got it, but it was not easy at all. Number 4 was a little easier than I thought, though. I'm going to make sure I'm circling that before I cross it out, so I have a visual reminder here and on my test screen of I'm not done really until I go back and look at that question. Okay. Now after that, we're going to take a break. After we've answered all of those questions, we've spent so much brain power. Now we're going to take a 5 to 10 minute break. So we're taking brain breaks between going to each different column. Okay, so after we finish the questions that took a lot of work, we're going to take a 5 to 10 minute break. We might lay our head down, maybe not nap per se, but lay your head down for 5 minutes, give your eyes a break from staring at the computer screen, give your brain a break from thinking. You might go to the bathroom. Going to the bathroom means I can get up and go walk to the bathroom. I'm the only person in the bathroom. I can maybe do some jumping jacks or run in place. Just get the blood flowing again and just get some energy back, right? Maybe you're drinking some water or eating your snacks. You can doodle on your scratch paper. There are so many things you can do. You do not have to sit through the test the entire time and take a 40, 50 question math test one question at a time until it's done. Okay, so give yourself a little bit of a chance to break between each column, reset yourself before going on to another category of difficult questions. So we've gone through the medium difficulty, and we're going to take a little break. Now we're going to go do the easier questions. The third thing we're going to do is the easy questions. So now we're doing the easy to me questions. Okay. The easy to me questions, you're just going to answer the questions in that category. We're really going to assume that you got all of the questions right here. Answer these questions. We're not going to flag anything because, again, we're assuming since it was an easy question for us that we got it correct. Now we don't really have to go back and look at it anyways. So, good thing here. I will say if you get to an easy question and it turns out to not be easy, you guys are using pencil. You can just erase that and put it into a different column based on the more appropriate difficulty, okay? So you can change the difficulty of the question after going back and looking at it more in depth, all right? Now looking at what we do after that is another brain break, 5 to 10 minutes of just nothing math related. Give your brain a break. Okay, it just worked really hard on those questions. Even though they were easier to you, you still had to recall facts, you still had work to do, you were still writing stuff down. Give yourself a break. Okay, and then you're going to go and do the next set of questions. You're going to do the questions that were an educated guess. Okay, the second time you went through the test, we did those questions that took a little bit of brain power for us to go back and remember things about. This column for educated guessing is a really difficult part of the test. So the fourth time we're going through the test, we answer our educated guesses. I answered number 1 and number 5. Now I'm going through the educated guess columns, and as I'm answering these, to differentiate between just a random guess on number 2 and an educated guess, we're asking that students on their scratch paper do some things to actually make this an educated guess. Okay, so for our educated guess column, we will do the following things. We will, on our scratch paper, we're going to write down several things before we even attempt to make an answer. Okay, this is going to become an educated guess because we are going to write down any facts that the problem tells us. So the fact about this problem is that it says a right triangle and it gives me a picture of a right triangle. So I've written down on my scratch paper that I have a right triangle and I drew the picture that it gave me in the problem. The second thing you're going to write down, the second thing we're writing down is the goal or the question. Sometimes the questions are like, which of the following statements are true? So then for the goal or the question, I'm just looking for the thing that's true. However, there's usually a common tie between all of the answer choices. Maybe in this question I'm looking for what's true about the areas of each square. All of the answer choices are talking about the area of some squares being added together and what that would do to the area of another square. What would that look like when I compare them? So I'm writing down the goal of the question, and then this is where those star chart annotations come in really, really handy because we've got so much information written on that from all year long that we can actually go back and look on our star chart and we will write down any information or all of the information from the star chart that has info for that topic. So we're writing down all of the information from the star chart from that topic. So now what we have is we have facts from the question, we have a bunch of stuff about that topic written down, and I now know what I'm looking for really specifically. From here, I can look at my answer choices if I have them, and I can start to think of a plan. Sometimes when we look at our answer choices, we realize we can actually work backwards. So can I work backwards? Is there a formula that I can just plug in? Is there an equation where I can just put answer choices into the equation and see if both sides are equal? All sorts of things like this. After that, then I can make an attempt to solve the problem. So an educated guess doesn't quite mean I'm guessing, it just means that before I solve, I have a whole bunch of other stuff I need to do first. Okay. Now after that, if you think the question is right, so if I got this right, if I believe I got this right, if I think I got it right, we're going to flag the question. So maybe I went through these steps and I did number 2 and I was able to eliminate some answer choices actually. So I gave myself a better chance at getting that question correct, but it was still a guess. But maybe on number 6, I really think I nailed it. I got that question right after I did all of those steps. There was some information on my star chart that really helped me eliminate all but one answer choice. So I was able to solve it and I think I got it right. Now the 5th time I go through the test is when we're going to look at those flags. The 5th time we go through the test, we're looking at the flagged questions. So before we submit our test, we go through the 5th time. So before submitting, we're going to review the flagged questions. Okay, this is going to look like checking your work. By checking our work, I mean if this was something that I wrote information down from my star chart or the facts, I'm going to check over that and see if I got it right. Checking the work or the notes that we made about the problem. At this point, we have seen every question at least once, and we've done a whole lot of math that we might have forgotten about because maybe it was from August that we learned that math, right? So after we've been able to see and think and process a bunch more math, now I'll have some more insight to, is something that I wrote down correct or incorrect? Maybe I should change that. Oh, this was supposed to be a negative. This was supposed to be a positive. Those numbers are written wrong. Maybe I didn't type it in my calculator right. So you're just checking the notes and the work that you have from the problem, retyping in anything in the calculator that was typed into the calculator. After that, check to see if your answer makes sense. Check to see if the answer makes sense. If I was if I was working on a scientific notation problem and the original number was like 3 billion, then I know the exponent in scientific notation needs to be positive. So if I wrote an answer or picked an answer where the exponent was negative, I know the answer doesn't make sense, and I can go back and review that. Okay, so we're doing the flagged questions that we had. The flagged questions that we had were ones that we thought were easier than they really were. Sorry, the ones that were easier than we had anticipated, right? Or the ones that I think I got right from the educated guesses. That's because after going through all of the math, now I've got a lot more insight, and I've remembered a lot more things. So after being able to do all of that, then I can really hone in on, was my work right? Did I make good notes? Did I calculate things right? And does my answer make sense? After that, feel free. You can submit your test. Make sure you've called over the testing teacher. That way they can confirm that you did submit your test. And after that, that's you submitted a STAAR test, and congratulations on that, because STAAR tests take a very long time. Yep. So best of luck to you guys. If you have questions, if you or your family have questions about how to approach STAAR tests, where to find practice STAAR tests, any of that information, please don't hesitate to reach out to your student's math teacher. All of our information is on the district websites. Thank you guys. Good luck.